Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I'm going to teach you how to make a sorting algorithm visualization project using Python and pygame. Now you don't need to know pygame in order to complete this. I'm going to explain everything you need as we go along, but this is not a beginner project whatsoever. I think it's more intermediate, but it's also not going to be super hard. So if you're comfortable with the basics of programming in Python, then you should probably be able to complete this. So I'm actually going to let this run a little bit so that you can see what kind of project you can expect. As you can see, we have a bunch of rectangles with different heights. You can see which rectangle is being selected, which one is smallest, which ones are already sorted, and you can basically visualize the algorithm working. The algorithm that we're going to be using is going to be selection sort. If you don't know what that is, then that's totally fine. It's a very simple sorting algorithm that I'm going to explain thoroughly. And if you know any other sorting algorithms, then you can also use those and try to implement those as well. Okay, so now let's actually go into the project. We're not going to waste any more time. In this other file that I have here, I only have my colors. You can actually just copy this from the link in the description. The code is on my GitHub. And the first thing we're going to do here is install pygame. So go to your shell or your terminal or your command prompt and type pip install pygame. This should install pygame for you. Now let's actually import pygame into our program. Let's say pygame.init. So we're going to initialize pygame. Then we're going to say pygame.display.set mode. And this is going to create a window. So let me actually say window in all caps is going to equal this, and this is going to take in the dimensions of our window. So I'm going to say window size, that's going to be 600, like that, and this is going to take in a tuple with the width and the height. Both of those are going to be the same, so window size by window size, like that. And then I'm going to say pygame.display.set caption, and this is going to set a caption for our window. I'm going to say sorting algorithm visualization, like that. So if I run this now, a window is going to pop up and it's immediately going to shut down. So to actually make this linger a little bit longer, I'm going to create a variable here called run. It's going to be equal to true, and I'm going to say while run. This is going to be my main loop, and I'm going to say for event in pygame.event.get. So this is going to iterate through every event in pygame, and by event I mean something like the player clicking a key or clicking on the mouse or clicking the X to quit the application. All of those are going to be pygame events, and if the event type is equal to pygame.quit, like this in all caps, then run is going to equal false. So if the type of the event is the player or not the player, because this is not a game, but the person that's running the application closes the window, then run is going to equal false. And down here I'm going to say pygame.display.update. This is actually very important because every time you make alterations to your screen, those are actually not going to be rendered if you don't have this. So you need to actually update your screen every time you do that. And in the end, I'm going to say pygame.quit. So just like we initialize pygame, we also need to quit it. If I run this now, as you can see, we have a blank window. The caption is sorting algorithm visualization, and nothing is really going to happen, right? So let's actually start coding our rectangles. So the rectangles are going to be objects of the rectangle class. So I'm actually going to go here and I'm going to create a class here. It's going to be called rectangle, and I'm going to define the init method like that. This is going to take in self. It's going to take in a color, an X, a height, and it's not going to take a width because all of the rectangles are actually going to have the same width. And in order to have that happen, I'm going to go here, I'm going to say variables, and here I'm going to say the rect width is going to be 20, like that. And this is variables, like that. Okay, so now let's go here. I'm going to say self.color equals color, self.x equals x, and self.width equals the rect width, and the self.height is going to be the height, like that. So that is it for our init method. Now I'm going to create a couple of methods that are going to change the color of my rectangle depending on what we're doing with it, right? So if it is already sorted, it's going to have a certain color. If we're selecting it, it's going to have a different color, and so on. So I'm going to say define select. This is going to take in self, and here all we're going to do is set the color to blue, like that. Then we're going to have another method called unselect. This is going to take in self. I'm going to say self.color equals purple. Then we're going to have a method called set smallest, like that. It's going to take in self, and I'm going to say self.color is equal to light blue. And then define set sorted. So if our rectangle is already sorted, I'm going to say self.color is equal to green. So we're going to set the color to green. And that is it for our rectangles class. Now let's actually create a function that creates the rectangles for us. So I'm going to say create rectangles like that. And in here, I'm going to have a couple of variables. First of all, I'm going to have number of rectangles. So rectangles like that. And this is going to be the window size divided by the rect width, like that. So we're going to take the width of every rectangle and we're going to divide the window size by that. And I also want to add a margin, so I'm going to say -5, so that the rectangles are not drawn from the beginning of the window to the end of the window. I want to have a little bit of margin on the sides, so I'm going to say -5. Then I'm going to say rectangles. There's going to be a list with all of the rectangles. And then I'm going to say heights. There's going to be a list of all of the heights because I don't want two rectangles to be able to have the same height. So every time I generate a random height, I'm going to check if that height is already in this list or not. So for I in range, and this is going to go from 5 to num rectangles. I'm going to say height equals random.randint between 20 and 500. So this is going to take our height and it's going to generate a random number between 20 and 500. Now I actually need to import the random module here, like that. Let's go back down and let's continue. Now, since I don't want to have heights that are the same, I'm going to say while height in heights, like that. So while our height is already in the heights list, I'm going to say height equals random.randint 20 500. So we're going to generate a new height while that height is already taken, right? And then I'm going to say heights dot append the height so that we don't have that height repeated. And then rect is equal to rectangle. So I'm going to create a rectangle here. This is going to be purple. The x is going to be I times the rect width, and the height is going to be height. And I think I made a typo here. This is rectangle, like that. Okay, so now I'm going to say rectangles dot append the rect, like that. So this is going to append our rectangles to the rectangles list, and then I'm going to return rectangles, like that. So that is all we need for our create rectangles function. Now let's define a draw rects function. This is going to take in rectangles, like that. So this is actually going to draw our rectangles onto the screen. So the first thing is I'm going to fill the window, so window.fill with gray. This is a built-in function in pygame that basically fills the background of the window with a color. Then for rect in rectangles, so for each rectangle in our rectangles list, I'm going to draw this rectangle by using a pygame.draw.rect function. This is also a pygame built-in function. This is going to take in the surface where we're going to draw our rectangle, so window. Then it's going to take in the color of our rectangle, so rect.color. We're going to access the color attribute of our rectangle. And then it takes in an x, a y, a height, and a width. So for the x, I'm going to say rect.x. Then I'm going to say 200 for now, but I'm actually going to change this later. You're going to see why in just a moment. Then I'm going to say rect.width for the width and rect.height for the height. Okay, so let's actually go here to our loop. I'm going to say draw rects with the rectangles list, and I'm actually going to say rectangles, oops, not the class rectangles. I'm going to say rectangles equals create rectangles, like that. This is going to create a set of rectangles, and then I'm going to go here to my loop and I'm going to draw those rectangles in each iteration of my loop. So if I run this now, as you can see, the rectangles are drawn onto the screen. However, we have two slight problems. The first one is obviously the rectangles aren't in the right direction, right? They're being drawn from the top to the bottom, and that's not what I want. I want them to be drawn from the bottom to the top, and actually at the bottom of my window here to the top, right? And the second problem is that there's nothing separating them, right? So they're just kind of smushed together. You don't really know when a rectangle ends and when the other one begins. So we're actually going to draw a couple of lines between those rectangles. So first, let's fix that first issue. And for that, all I need to do is I'm going to say window size minus the rect dot height, like that. And this is going to be our Y position. So the Y position where we're going to draw our rectangles is going to be window size minus the height. And why am I doing this? Well, in case you're unfamiliar with this, in pygame, the Y coordinates are going to decrease as you go up, and they're going to increase as you go down. So the Y axis is actually going to be inverted, right? So at the bottom of the window, the Y coordinates are going to be window size. And so I need to subtract the rectangle height from that window size and draw the rectangle onto that Y position. So if I actually run this now, this is going to invert the rectangles correctly. Now let's actually draw those lines I was talking about. Let me say pygame.draw.line. And this is going to take in our surface. It's going to be window. It's going to take in a color. It's going to be black. And then it's going to take in the starting position and the ending position, which are both going to be a tuple with an X and a Y. So for the starting position, I'm going to say rect.x and window size. And that's going to be the X and the Y. And for the end position, I'm going to say rect.x, so the same X, and the window size minus the rect.height. Height, like that. So if I run this now, as you can see, a line is going to be drawn on the left side of the rectangle. Now we need to do this for the right side and for the top. So I'm actually going to copy this and paste it twice because we're going to draw two more lines. So for the first line, the X is going to be rect.x plus the rect.width, and for the ending position as well, so rect.width, like that. And this is rect. The Y position of the starting coordinate is going to be window size, and the ending is going to be window size minus rect.height. So this is going to draw a line on the right and on the left of my rectangles. And the last one is on the top. So this is going to start out at rect.x. The Y is going to be window size minus the rect.height. Height, like that. Then the X of the ending position is going to be rect.x plus the rect.width, and the Y is going to be the same. So if I actually run this now, as you can see, we have little black lines separating our rectangles. I think it looks much better. So now that we have the basic interface for our project done, we're actually going to start coding the selection sort algorithm and the visualization. Like I said, this is a very simple algorithm. It basically consists of iterating through every position of the array, fixating the value in the current position, the current iteration, then iterating through that position plus 1 to the end of the array, finding the minimum value in that piece of the array and swapping that minimum with the element in the current position. Then we're going to do this for every position of the array until it is eventually sorted. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to say define selection sort, and this is going to take in the rectangles list. And this is actually going to be a generator. So a generator is basically a normal function, but it allows you to pause its execution at a certain point using the yield keyword. And then you can actually return to the execution of this function from the point where you left it off. So I actually have a full video about generators. If you want to know more about this topic, you can go watch it. However, I am going to explain everything you need right now. So in here, I'm going to create a variable called numRectangle. That's going to be the length of the rectangles list, like that. And this is rectangles, like that. And then I'm going to iterate through my rectangles list. So for I in range numRectangles. And in here, I'm going to set a variable called min index, and by default this is going to be I. So by default the index of the minimum value is going to be like the current index that we're at. And then I'm going to say rectangles at the position I dot set smallest, because remember we have these methods in our rectangle class that basically allow us to highlight the rectangles depending on what they are. So if they're being selected, smallest, they're already sorted, they're being unselected, and so on, and we can actually change their color based on that. Let's go back down right here. And then I'm going to iterate through this position +1 until the end of the array. So for j in range I +1 until the num rectangles. And here I'm going to say rectangles at the index j dot select. So we're going to select the current element. And then I'm going to redraw the rectangles with the updated colors. Then I'm going to say if rectangles at the index j dot height, because remember we're comparing the rectangles by their height, is smaller than the rectangles at the min index dot height, then it means that the current position that we're at has a smaller rectangle than the rectangle at the min index, right? So that means that the min index is now going to be j. And I'm also going to say rectangles at j dot set smallest, like that. Smallest, like that. And since we're changing the position of our smaller element, we also need to unselect the minimum index before we change that. So minimum index dot unselect before we change that to be the index j. Then down here, I'm going to redraw the rectangles list with the updated colors. I'm going to say rectangles at the index j dot unselect like that. And then I'm actually going to yield. So like I said, yield is going to pause our function and it's going to wait for a next function to be called on my generator. And when that next function is called on my generator, is going to return to the execution of that function from where it left it off. So I'm actually going to explain this a little bit later, but now we actually need to swap the rectangles, right? So we need to do this in two different ways. We need to swap them in the array itself, and we also need to physically swap them on the screen. So we need to change their coordinates. So in order to do this, I'm going to say rectangles at the index I dot x and rectangles at the index min index dot x is equal to the rectangles at the min index dot x and rectangles at the I index dot x. So we're actually going to swap the x position of our rectangles. Now we need to do the same for the position in the array. So we're going to say rectangles I and rectangles at the min index is equal to rectangles at the min index and rectangles I. So this is going to swap our rectangles. Then we need to say rectangles at the min index dot unselect. So we're going to unselect our min index, and we're going to say rectangles I dot set sorted, right? Because now our I position is already going to have the correct rectangle of the correct height. And lastly, we need to redraw the rectangles with the updated colors. So this is all we need for our selection sort function. Now let's actually try to use this, right? Now I'm actually going to go here to my main loop. I'm going to indent this, and I'm going to put this inside a function called main, just so that we don't have loose variables that are nested inside of anything. And I'm going to call this main function like that. Okay, so let's actually use this generator. So first I'm going to create a set of rectangles, then I'm going to draw those rectangles like that. And then I need to create something called a generator object. This is an object that is equal to calling the generator, and whenever I call the next function on it, it's going to go to the next step of the execution, basically. So I'm going to say sorting generator is going to equal selection sort with the rectangles list, like that. Then down here, I'm going to say sorting equals false. So when we are not sorting, this is going to equal false. When we are currently sorting, this is going to equal true. And then inside of my main loop, I'm going to say if sorting, So if we are currently sorting, I'm going to call the next function on my sorting generator, like that. However, how does our generator know when to stop executing this function, right? Because there's going to be a point where there isn't really anything left to execute. And we're going to be calling this next function, but what that's actually going to do is it's going to raise a stop iteration exception, right? Because we don't have anything else to execute in that function. So I'm actually going to put this inside of a try except clause. So I'm going to say try, I'm going to indent this. And then I'm going to say except, and this is going to be a stop iteration exception. And if we reach a stop iteration exception, I'm going to say sorting equals false. So we're no longer going to be sorting. And otherwise, so if we're not currently sorting, we're just going to redraw our rectangles over and over again. And I actually don't need this part right here, okay? Now, I actually need to create a condition that tells us when we're going to start sorting, right? And for me, that's going to be when the player or when the user presses the space. So when the user presses the space, that's either going to start sorting or it's going to pause the sorting process, right? Now, in order to do this, we're actually going to go here to our event handler. And there's an event in pygame, which is when a user clicks on a certain key of the keyboard. So when that happens, this is going to raise a key down event. So I'm going to say if event dot type like this equals pygame dot key, oops, and this is in all caps, so key down like that. Then I need to check which key we're pressing. So I'm actually going to say if event dot key is equal to pygame dot k underscore space in all caps like that. So if we are pressing this space, then I'm going to set sorting equal to not sorting, right? So Python is a very curious language. This is actually allowed. You can literally set the value of sorting to its opposite. So if we are currently sorting, we're just going to pause the sorting process. And if we are not sorting, we're going to recall the sorting process. Okay, so I'm actually going to add here an event key. So I'm going to say if event key equals pygame dot, and this is k underscore q. So if we press the q, I'm going to say run equals false. So this is just a little shortcut to close or to terminate the program if we want to. Okay, so this should actually work now. We have everything that we need, and I'm actually going to run this. And let's see what happens. So if I press the space, it starts sorting and we end up with a sorted array. So it really does work. However, in my opinion, this is a little bit fast. So I think this is a good time to add a clock. So I'm going to go up here to my global variables and I'm going to say clock equals pygame dot time dot clock. And this is going to create a clock object. This is dot clock, not dash clock. And I'm also going to say FPS equals 10. We don't need a crazy frame rate for this. I actually think it looks a bit cooler when it is done slower. So I'm going to set the frame rate to 10. And I'm going to go down here back to my main function. Inside of my main loop, I'm going to say clock dot tick, dot tick at the FPS, like that. And did I actually create a variable? Or yeah, I did create a variable. So this is going to set our frame rate to 10. Okay, so if I run this now, and this is going to run a little bit faster, right? So we can actually see what is happening here. Now it seems like I'm unselecting my minimum element too soon because it is turning blue. So let me actually take a look at why that is happening, and I'll be right back. Okay, so here in my selection sort function, this line right here is wrong. So I actually need to take this out of the if statement. And this is not rectangles j, this is going to be rectangles at the min index dot set smallest. And now if I run this and I click on the space, it starts sorting, and you can notice that the smallest element actually stays selected as smallest element as the algorithm goes on. Okay, so I'm going to close this, and the last thing that we need is a little bit of text to basically explain the commands to the user, right? So under my selection sort function, I'm going to say display text, and this is going to take in the text that we're going to write, a Y position, and a font size. Then I'm going to say font equals pygame dot font dot sys font. This basically allows us to select a font for our text. I'm going to say Futura. Then I'm going to set the size of the font to be size. Then I'm going to say text equals font dot render. And this is going to be rendering the text tst that we're passing in. Then we have a parameter that's going to be true, and then we have a color that's going to be black, like that. And then I need to say text.rect equals text.get rect, like that. And this is going to be centered at the window size divided by 2 and the y. And this actually needs to be inside of parentheses, I think, like that. And then I'm going to say window dot split, like that. The text at the text dot at the text rect, like that. And this is an underscore. Okay, so I'm sorry if that was a bit confusing, but basically we're going to create a display text function. We're going to create a font here. We're going to give it a Futura style, and we're going to give it a size that we're going to pass into our function. Then we're going to create a text that's going to be equal to font.render, and we're going to render basically the text that we're inputting in a black font. Then we're going to say text rect is going to be text.getRect. So everything in pygame is going to be drawn on top of a rectangle, and we actually need to define the coordinates of that rectangle. So I'm saying that the rectangle that contains the text is going to be centered at the window size divided by 2 and the y parameter that I pass in here. And then I'm going to bullet my text onto the text rect in my window, basically. So this is all we need for our draw text function. Then let's actually go to our main function and display this text. So down here under my if sorting statement, I'm going to say display text. This is going to take in the text. So sorting algorithm visualization, this is going to be the caption basically, and then a colon. Then the y is going to be 30 and the font size is going to be 40. Then I'm going to display another piece of text. This time it's going to be press space to start sorting, or pause, or Q to quit, like that. And this is going to be at the 70 position, like y position is going to be 70 and the size is going to be 30. Okay, so if I actually run this now, we actually have our sorting algorithm visualization project complete, right? It's going to have a title, then it's going to say press space to start sorting, or pause, or Q to quit. If I press the space, it starts sorting. We can select each rectangle based on what we're doing with it. So we're just unselecting it. If we're just unselecting them, they're going to be purple. If we are currently selecting them, they're going to be dark blue. If they are the smallest rectangle, they're going to be light blue. And if they are already sorted, they're going to be green. Now, like I said, you can also do this with any other basically sorting algorithm that you want. You have a lot of space here in this project to kind of tweak this your way. So I hope you learned a lot with this video, and I hope it was helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.